Well, seeing that it's 7 o'clock on August the 7th, I'd like to get started with our community forum. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fourth community forum that our project team has held regarding the Wildwood Early Childhood Center school building project. My name is Glen Brand. It is my pleasure to serve as both the superintendent of schools here in Wilmington, as well as the chair of the Wildwood School Building Committee. For those of you watching at home this evening, and for those of you who may view this recording after the meeting, I want to thank you for taking the time out of a summer evening to join us as we take this opportunity to share more information about this important project for the future of our students, our staff, and families in the Wilmington Public Schools. The meeting is being held virtually this evening with the recognition that in these summer months, it provides the best opportunity, we believe, to engage members of our community here in Wilmington, to allow them to join and continue to learn more about this project. In addition to the monthly building committee meetings that the project team has held, these previous public forums in which we've invited members of the community to come and to learn more about this project as we seek to navigate the future of public education here in Wilmington at the elementary level. All of these forums, the previous three and this one as well, have been recorded, and anyone in our community is welcome to still view these meetings. All of the information related to them, including the presentations and the recordings of the meetings, are available on the district's website, where we have built and continue to add to a specific project page for this project. Next slide, please. I'd like to take the opportunity and provide you with an overview of tonight's forum. First, our building committee, which I'll get to in just a moment, recommended many months ago that it would be an important avenue and endeavor to provide opportunities for people to attend these forums, as opposed to our regular business meetings, for the sole purpose of trying to get up to speed on the developments associated with this project. This will take place again this evening first, and in a few moments, I will turn it over to our design team to walk you through a presentation. Following the presentation, we will open the forum up to comments and questions from those who are in attendance this evening. We do not have a specific time limit or end time for our forum tonight, so please don't worry, as there will be plenty of opportunity to share your comments, feedbacks, and questions. But I will ask you to hold your comments and questions until the end of the presentation. And once we get to that point, we'll talk more about how we're going to navigate that. Next slide, please. Before we begin tonight, though, I do want to take a moment and provide members of our community with a brief introduction to the many individuals who are working hard and giving an awful lot of their time to help move the project forward on behalf of our community. Next slide. First, let me start with the team, as we refer to it as, who's working hard to help advance the work with this project. First, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or as more commonly referred to, the MSBA. I realize that it's a term that we've referred to many times, increasingly over the last few years, in fact, related to this project. In short, if you're joining us for just the first time, this is really the entire reason that this project is even underway, as the MSBA is a sole grant program or funding arm in the state of Massachusetts to help local communities offset costs for school construction and renovation. In 2020, the Select Board and the School Committee voted to approve our application to the MSBA for the current project that is now underway. Next, we have SMMA. It's a firm, or just back up if you could, a firm or company that serves as the town's owner project manager. Think of them as a general contractor of sorts who represents the interests of our citizen in this project. The designer, our designer team is here tonight and will take the bulk of the presentation in a few moments, and that is Doran Whittier, who has served as the architect. The school committee also holds an important role in the project as the body that must ultimately approve the overall educational program plan of the project that comes to be. And lastly, certainly not least, is the school building committee. Next slide, please. School Building Committee was formed now well over a year and a half ago and includes broad representation from multiple stakeholder groups, including elected officials, parents, guardians, community members, WPS school and district leaders, as well as town officials. Next slide, please. They have been meeting extensively for this project and serve as decision maker on which option will ultimately advance forward in the process. On behalf of our students and their families, both current and future generations, I want to personally thank them for their countless hours of service to this project and to our community. So what this is and what it can be, this next piece has really been something that has been shared briefly before, but in the interest of those members of our community who might be joining for the first time, just wanted to take a moment and make sure to bring this to your attention. Ultimately, I view this as a project that allows us to look into the future and not backwards for what has been. It's about dreaming of sorts as it relates to school and places where our future generations will come to learn and play and grow. And it's about thinking big about bringing modernization to our school facilities. I know, and I have come to learn that they are certainly beloved buildings that have served the town and the community of Wilmington for many, many years, but they largely resemble the time in which they were built some 50 and 60 years ago. Next slide, please. If you're joining us for the first time and you haven't had the opportunity perhaps to visit or be in a modern elementary school facility, you may want to take a few moments and follow the link that will take you to a short video that we assembled a number of months back. Provide you a glimpse with what can be as it relates to future thinking of this project. And I know that certainly your eyes will be wide open in terms of the possibilities that hopefully will come down the road. Next slide. As a friendly reminder, again, for those that might have just joined us, we will be taking questions tonight as part of the forum, but we will do so at the end of the presentation. So if you can just sit tight, and we'll talk more about that when we get there. But with that, this time I'd like to turn this over to our design team, Doran Whittier, specifically Ronnie, who's going to take it from here. Ronnie?
Thank you, Dr. Brand. So as in previous meetings, we are going to use Mentimeter. It's a platform to solicit live feedback from everyone in person and those participating remotely, which today we're all participating remotely. We wanted to just remind you of a few of the norms that come with Mentimeter. All responses are anonymous. There is an opportunity to provide comments and ask questions for tonight's meeting via the Zoom platform, as Dr. Brand just mentioned. But our intention is to leave the Mentimeter platform open for a full week after tonight's meeting. And that way, comments and responses will be captured and we can tally. It is also important to note that this feedback is really important to the school building committee, but it is for information purposes only. We are not going to be raising our hands and taking any sort of official votes tonight, but we want to be clear that the intent of this meeting is for information gathering and not decision making. So here are the instructions. There's two ways to access the platform. We find it works best on a handheld device. So your tablet or a handheld phone, you can point your camera to the QR code. And if that isn't working for you, you can actually go directly to the website, menti.com, and enter the code that you see on the screen. It's 61241572. We'll give everyone a moment to connect. And let us know that you've reached the platform by hitting a thumbs up, please. Okay, looks like everyone's starting to log on. That's great. As we advance the slides in the presentation, the graphic content will automatically advance on your device as well, but I will let you know when there's a question that requires a response. It looks like we have 26, 27 and rising. Excellent. Thank you. So let's do a first test like we did in previous meetings. So we want to know who is here tonight. So let's have you respond with who you are representing. And feel free to respond to more than one if you fall into more than one category. So we looks like we have a few members of each category, except maybe students. That's okay. The majority looks like parents, but a good distribution here. So we'll keep moving along. And this will continue to tally as everyone's responding. So there are a few ways to provide feedback. One way is to select a reaction choice at the bottom of the screen. If there are particular slides that you like and you want to provide a reaction, whether it's a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or a heart. Also for tonight's meeting, you can enter questions in the Q&A feature, and we'll get to those towards the end of the meeting. We'll convert this Mentimeter platform to enable the Q&A feature after tonight's meeting, as mentioned. So anybody that watches this afterwards as a recording can still provide feedback for up to 1 week. So I'll pass it back to Dr. Brand.
Thanks, Ronnie. I mentioned at the beginning that one of our vital partners in this project is the MSBA. And they really are the backbone of this project, as it would be for any other community that has made the decision to partner with MSBA to offset construction costs for schools. As a result, there are a number of benchmarks and requirements, and as well as a schedule that our project has to adhere to, or it represents ultimately a problem for our progression in the program. But before we dive into a little bit more deeper with the process and exactly where we're at in the schedule, let's take a quick look back in terms of how we got here. In the spring of 2020, as I mentioned earlier, the select board and the school committee authorized the town manager and myself as a superintendent at the time to submit applications for all 6 elementary schools. And we did so for the simple reason that all really are the same vintage. All have similar needs and common deficiencies in terms of buildings to deliver programs and services. While the town and their respective departments have done an excellent job maintaining the school facilities, they nevertheless require significant upgrades and modernization to support teaching and learning in the current time. At the time of our submission, we were required to designate one project as the priority project, which we did, and that was the Wildwood. Next slide. It's understood that one of the common questions that some might ask is exactly how big are we thinking about building these buildings, whatever the ultimate option is, and it's a great question, and it's one that rightly should be asked. Having been directly involved in the process myself, what I can tell you is that there's an extensive discussion, this extensive analysis of enrollment with and between a district, in this case ours, and MSBA. It takes a very, very deep dive at future projections of enrollment, past enrollment trends, and very closely is examined by the MSBA officials and the partnering district. After that analysis, a specific enrollment number gets locked in, as it were, and it can't change through the life of the project. Our agreed upon enrollment numbers are reflected here on this slide for the 3 different building options currently that are being considered in relationship to the project. In order to dig a little bit deeper into the MSBA process and the specific timeline that our project is under right now, I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who is here tonight as our owner's project manager. Julie?
Thank you, Dr. Brand. What you see on your screen are the 8 modules that the MSBA follows as part of any project. Module 1, the invitation into the MSBA eligibility period. The town of Wilmington was invited into the eligibility period in April of 2021. In November of 2022, we entered into Module 2, which is the project team. SMMA was hired as the owner's project manager to represent the town of Wilmington for the new elementary school project. Shortly thereafter, Doreen Whittier was brought on board as the designer. Our feasibility study began in April of 2023, and that is the beginning of Module 3. We are currently still in Module 3. Next slide. As part of the MSBA process, we began the feasibility study and have completed the preliminary design program, which takes many concepts, options over different sites and narrows it down to the few. The preliminary design program was submitted to the MSBA in April of 2024. We began the next step of narrowing down the few options to the one preferred option. School Building Committee will be voting for the one preferred option on August 20th. From there, Doran Whittier will begin the schematic design phase, which will start to refine the preferred option. In addition, we will also do a third cost estimate by both Doran Whittier and SMMA and reconcile those costs. We will also work with the MSBA on the project scope and budget agreement to prepare the town for a vote on funding. Next slide. Ronnie, you're on mute.
In the first phase of the feasibility study, the design team evaluated the existing school facilities and sites that are part of the project. We reviewed the 3 school locations, Wildwood, Woburn Street, and North Intermediate, to understand the potential limitations and opportunities at each location. In general, the buildings are of similar vintage, but the sizes of the sites vary. This became evident when we began the site design and layouts for the multiple option study that will be shared later in the presentation. We assessed current conditions of the existing buildings and sites, and this snapshot of the results scored give you an understanding of how each school compared to the others. As expected from buildings of similar vintage, scores are not that far apart. In general, North Intermediate had more updates to the building and scored higher than Woburn Street and Wildwood schools. Using this information, the design team generated a list of repair items and the code requirements that is referred to as capital improvements to extend the life of the buildings for the next 50 years. This is the basis for the repair-only options we will discuss later on. In summary, the facilities are maintained and currently operational. However, inevitable infrastructure upgrades may be limited without a major project to meet current codes and ideally the educational vision in Wilmington. The next step was to define the project needs through a series of 8 visioning sessions with over 50 participants representing the district and community, administrators, staff, town representatives, seniors, parents, and students. We developed a summary of spaces for a proposed project that would meet both the building and educational needs for each enrollment studied, and developed 18 alternatives at 4 sites for review. The 3 school sites that were mentioned, as well as the town hall site. The school building committee's goal at the end of the preliminary design program phase was to shortlist these options. As a refresher, the MSBA requires a repair-only option move forward onto the shortlist. The work proposed in the repair-only alternatives are not just cosmetic, but look to extend the infrastructure of the buildings and meet current codes as well. Individual items on the list may not trigger codes. However, several smaller projects or even one larger project will trigger code upgrades and are included in these alternatives. However, these options do not add square footage to address the space needs in the district. During the preliminary design program phase, or PDP, the 18 options were evaluated with a matrix and scored. The shortlisted options were the front runners in the evaluation matrix for each enrollment and type of project to move into the phase, with projects ranging from $26 million for a repair-only pre-K option to $215 million for a pre-K-5 new construction option. The preliminary design program submission to the MSBA in April included 7 options for further study in PSR. The shortlist included the pre-K repair-only and new construction alternatives at the Wildwood site. Pre-K3 and pre-K5 repair-only options were carried for cost comparison only, as it does not include the pre-K population, which is a requirement for any project that moves forward. A pre-K3 and pre-K5 new construction alternatives also moved forward for further study. One pre-K5 renovation addition option was also shortlisted. Comments from MSBA included carrying pre-KK and pre-K3 renovation and addition options for cost comparison as well, circled in red. This concluded with 9 options for further review in the PSR phase, 4 of which were for cost comparison. Similar to the preliminary design program phase, we refined the shortlisted options in the preferred schematic phase with these questions in mind. Can we accomplish our goals that were set? How does it fit? And how could we make it better? So now we'll move on to the preferred schematic design update. Our first step was to review and confirm the educational program and space needs. Adjustments to the pre-K classroom count and the music art programs reduced square footage slightly across the board as highlighted in purple. The pre-K-5 new option includes a 3-story building located behind the existing building on the North Intermediate site. In PSR, the floor plans are refined to adjust the layout based on programmatic changes and improve public and private zones, different adjacencies, and travel distances for safety and code. This option included a large 12,000 square foot gymnasium in the program. The north site has access to municipal utilities, and the building can be constructed with minimal disruption to the existing building. North Intermediate students can move into the new building once constructed. The existing building would be demolished to finish site work. Once completed, the remaining pre-K-3 students would occupy the building. For each of the options we studied, the site plans incorporated feedback from our meeting with public safety officials and grading information to improve circulation during daily use and during emergencies. At the North Intermediate site, for example, we accomplished complete bus and vehicle separation and an alternate pickup option to accommodate more vehicle queuing on site if needed. Although a traffic study will be completed for the preferred site in the next phase, schematic design, experience informs us that moving vehicles off the roadways and onto the site reduces impact of traffic to the neighborhood during peak hours. Pre-K-5 AR1 includes renovations and additions resulting in a 4-story building on the North Intermediate site. This option also includes a larger 12,000 square foot gymnasium in the program. Construction would have significant disruptions to the operation of the existing school. Renovations and additions are phased, requiring students and staff to relocate around the building as needed to complete work at each phase. Once completed, the remaining pre-K-3 students would occupy the building. Pre-K-3 N1 is a new construction of a 2-story building located just north of the existing building on the Woburn Street site. From High Street, the building would appear to be a single-story building, taking advantage of the grade change with pre-K and K located at the lower level. The pre-K-3 options include a 6,000 square foot gymnasium. This new option has significant retaining walls to accommodate circulation in field areas, noted by the thick black lines, and the site is connected to town water but requires a septic system. The dashed line to the left of the proposed building is a classroom wing that projects over the access road. This provides covered play area during school hours. Buses and emergency vehicles would pass under this portion of the building when utilizing the access road. Construction would disrupt the operation of the existing school as access roads and temporary parking would be required to construct the building. Students and staff would relocate to the new building to allow for demolition of the existing building and site work completion. Pre-K students would then also occupy the new building for a pre-K-3 school. The pre-K-3 ad reno option includes renovations and additions resulting in a 3-story building on the Woburn Street site. Similar to the new construction option, retaining walls are required to navigate the grades on site, and construction would include disruption to the operation of the existing school circulation and parking. The new additions would be constructed first, then renovations to the existing building. Once completed, the remaining pre-K students would occupy the building. The pre-K new option includes a single-story building on the Wildwood site. This option was refined since the PDP phase, improving public and private zones within the building. As the site is unoccupied, no phasing is required. Retaining walls and a new septic system are required to accomplish this alternative. The pre-K ad reno includes renovations and additions for a single-story building at the Wildwood site. Similar to the new alternative, no phasing is needed, but retaining walls and a new septic system are also required. The shortlisted options were evaluated against the same 8 categories from the previous phase for continuity. The overall scoring was consistent with PDP findings, even with adjustments based on revised layouts and site developments. The highest scoring alternative is a new pre-K-5 school at the North Intermediate site, followed by the pre-K-5 Ad Reno and new pre-K-3 at the Woburn Street site. The shortlisted options were then estimated this past July. Things to keep in mind about the estimate. These are estimates to compare the relative cost between options. These are order of magnitude costs, not exact cost analyses or determinations of final cost, which will happen closer in the next phase. Since the first estimate, some costs went up while others went down, but ultimately they are of similar range. So what changed? The adjustments from PDP to PSR include a reduction of the building square footage. It also includes site costs, which had a greater impact than that at PDP, since those were based on a percentage of the building square footage. But in PSR, costs reflect a more detailed site plan, including site features, amenities, and additional grading information for estimating. The construction soft costs are a percentage function of cost and adjust up or down accordingly. So as you can see, the numbers have shifted in both directions depending on the option. Overall, the updated project cost either increased or decreased by 3 to 6% in the pre-KK and pre-K3 options. The pre-K5 options had a more significant decrease at 8%. One example for this is that the north site does not have as significant grade changes and the need for substantial retaining walls as Woburn and Wildwood sites. To help put these numbers into perspective, the MSBA shares historical and current cost data for projects on their website. The Wilmington High School data is shared as it is the most recent school project for Wilmington. The list on the right reflects the cost square footage for current and future high school projects. The increase in cost from 2013 to now is due to escalation over the last several years, as well as meeting updated energy codes. When we look closer at the projects currently in the feasibility and schematic design phases, the cost per square footage are closer in range with an average of 789 square feet. The best way to evaluate these are by cost per square foot, since the enrollment and sites vary. This project falls right in the middle of that range. Now that we've reviewed the updated plans, evaluation matrix scoring, and the estimated costs, we want to take a moment and ask you to rank your options. One would be your most preferred option. So if you can, please take a moment, and we should see these populate on the screen. I'll give it another moment. And as mentioned previously, we will be leaving this open for a week. So for those watching the recording, we'll be able to give an updated ranking at the end of a week from today. It looks like the pre-K5 new option is in the lead here. The pre-K5 Ad Reno and the pre-K3 new are kind of head to head. Okay, we'll keep moving. Thank you. We took a look at the 5 options shortlisted at PDP to give an idea on the potential cost impact to the community. After considering scope eligible for MSBA reimbursement, the numbers on the screen reflect the local share of the project. MSBA has caps on certain items such as site work. This impacts the local share and the smaller delta with Wildwood and Woburn sites as compared to the North Intermediate site. So the numbers in green would be the potential local share. To understand the potential total local share to address the pre-K-5 population within this project, we have added the cost of the repair-only options on this slide. For example, if a pre-KK option is selected as the preferred option, it would not address any needs at the Woburn Street or North Intermediate sites with this project. As we do not know when those projects would happen, we have included the total cost of those repair projects. So a new pre-KK option for $69.7 million would total to $149 million once the Woburn and North projects are added, since it is completed in 3 separate projects for the town. A pre-K3 project would result in 2 projects for the town. Aside from the pre-KK repair-only option, the pre-K5 options are somewhat less expensive since the pre-K5 population would be addressed within one project. The town has generated the estimated tax impact, and Mr. Slagle will take you through that information next.
Thank you, Rainey. I appreciate that. So in working with folks in town hall, including the town assessor and our temporary finance director, we reviewed the information that was provided as a part of the estimate process from our consultants, and looking at the estimated local share, did a calculation as to what the total impact to the town in annual debt service and then the annual tax increase on average single-family homes would be. It's important to note that these numbers are all estimates and they're based on the following information. These are all based on the FY24 tax rate, as the FY25 tax rate is not set until later in the fall. These are all based on a 4.0 interest rate. If interest rates obviously changed before we did borrowing, that would have an impact on these numbers. It's also important to note that the average single-family value that this is based on is $683,790. The other thing that's important to note is that these numbers in green don't include the additional costs of projects to maintain either the Woburn and North or the North, depending on which project we'd be going forward with. So that being said, if you look in the first column, the pre-K through K, at the Wildwood site, the estimated local share of $29.3 million results in an annual estimated debt payment of approximately $2.2 million and an annual tax increase on the average single-family home of approximately $160, which breaks down to approximately $13 a month. The new pre-K through K at the Wildwood site would have an annual debt payment of $4.9 million, an annual tax increase of $370, and a monthly impact of $31. One thing to note about these annual debt payments is they are all based on what's called a decreasing debt schedule, which means the largest debt payment would be in year 1. And over the 30-year debt payment, each year the debt payment would get smaller. So in year 30, the total debt payment would be less than 50% of the debt payment in year 1. So if you look at the pre-K through 3 at the Woburn Street site, that would be a local share of $106 million, an annual debt payment of approximately $7.8 million, an annual tax increase on an average single-family home of $590, which is about $49 per month impact. And again, in year 30, that would be less than 50% of those numbers. The pre-K through 5 at the North Intermediate site, both the ad reno and the new are relatively similar at 129.1 million and 132.1 million. The annual debt payment for the ad reno would be 9.5 million and 9.7 million for the new. The annual tax increase would be 710,000 for the ad reno, 730 for the new, and the monthly impact would be $59 or $61 relatively. And again, just to reiterate, that's in year 1, and over the course of the 30 years, those numbers would decrease so that it would be less than 50% of those numbers by the end of the total. There's 3 basic pieces of information that were used to calculate these numbers. The first is the estimated cost of the project. The second is the estimated reimbursement we get from the state. And the third is obviously the interest rate. So a change in any one of those numbers will obviously affect the total numbers at the bottom line. But this is a kind of a relatively conservative middle of the scale estimate of what the impact would be to the taxes. Thank you, Rainey.
Thank you. So after receiving the information about the local community tax impact information, let's do a ranking again. Again, 1 being the most preferred option. This is just to give us a comparison from the previous ranking, if there's a change or not. It looks like the pre-K 5 options are getting the most votes, followed by pre-K 3 and then pre-K K. Thank you to those that have been responding. It'll continue to tally as we go. Give it 1 more minute. So you may recall from previous presentations that a pre-K 5 grade configuration, all of those options included a high school sized gymnasium space. This 12,000 square foot gymnasium is essentially twice the size of what the MSBA considers a typical elementary school gymnasium space. Previous prompts to the community about whether or not a larger gymnasium is a priority for the community indicated that the most favorable response was, regardless of the circumstance of potentially decommissioning the other elementary school sites, that a 12,000 square foot gymnasium was preferred. The larger gym space is still included in the pre-K 5 options, which would allow for no reduction of programmatic needs for CARES, the rec department, and other groups currently utilizing the gymnasium spaces at Woburn and North sites. And just to clarify, the MSBA program typically allocates and reimburses for a 6,000 square foot gymnasium in the pre-K 5 enrollment. So the question to you is, if a pre-K 5 alternative is selected as the preferred option, are you in favor of the larger gymnasium to support community activities, even if MSBA reimbursement will only cover half the cost? This means the town will need to cover the portion not eligible for reimbursement. Looks like a lot of you have already been responding while I was still talking. So similar to when we've asked this question previously, it looks like the larger gym is still favored and preferred. Thank you for responding. Feel free to keep responding, it'll populate.
One of the things that we have focused on at the outset of the launch of this project is seeking ways to engage and inform our community about the project, recognizing that this is certainly a very important development for everyone in town. At this time, I'm happy to turn it over to Vivian, who is a resident here in Wilmington, who's also the co-chair of our building committee, as well as the chair of the Communications Outreach Committee subcommittee, to provide you with an update on some of the efforts to date. Vivian?
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you everyone for joining. This has been part of our community outreach to try to engage the community as best as possible, as well as keep you well informed of the upcoming progress that we've made thus far. Ronnie, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Thank you. As part of the community outreach efforts, we have held all of our SBC meetings, both in person as well as virtually, and allowing opportunities for members of the community to participate and ask questions. We've held community forums such as this one, inserted flyers into your water bills, as well as participated and provided information for the newsletter, Wildcat Corner, went on to meet with the seniors at the senior center. We also participated and held a booth at the Fun on the 4th all of the nights, and have done much effort for the school district website, the project specific website, along with FAQs, frequently asked questions, that we received both during Fun on the 4th as well as throughout all of our efforts. We have multiple boards displayed all around town and have tried to, in various opportunities, to have a town-wide communication of all project information. We understand that not everybody is very technologically savvy, and a lot of our residents still rely on a lot of information provided on paper. With that, we have also done our efforts to participate and provide information in the town crier, as well as posters and flyers all around the town. As most recently as yesterday, we were going around town putting up flyers for tonight's event, as well as our upcoming meetings at such places as Market Basket, McKinnon's, Lapels, even Dollar General. Anywhere and everywhere that would allow us to post, we definitely did so. And we welcome continuing to do it in order to get as much of the information and project-specific information out to the community as possible. Thank you, Ronnie. If you wouldn't mind, next slide.
Thank you, Vivian. So I wanted to quickly share the results from Community Forum number 3. Over 135 responders, and more than half of them were identified as parents, followed by community members, teachers, and staff. Overall, the preference indicated pre-K-5 as the preferred configuration, and then also that new construction options were the preferred of the types of construction that would happen. So I'll pass it on back to Vivian, and she can review some of the results from the Fun on the 4th survey.
The Fun on the 4th was definitely a lot of fun. We were able to host a table at the event, and where many participants were able to, from the school building committee as well as the school committee and other committees in town, were able to join along with us to hear from residents from the community on what their preferred options were. Many of the sentiments expressed during the Fun on the 4th were very similar and in align and to the results we saw in the community forums held to date. So if Ronnie, if you wouldn't mind sliding over. To the next. So we asked specific questions first. We wanted to know and understand if they had school-age children or relatives in the school system currently, and majority of which provided a yes response to. We didn't limit it to those that were only of school-age children parents. We want to hear from everybody. Next. And one of the other questions that we wanted to gain information on from the public is if they were in favor of the consolidation. We understand that as part of our town-wide master plan, there was efforts for consolidation previously, but we wanted to hear from the residents themselves if they were still in favor of a school consolidation or wanted to keep the system as we had currently. And a great number of them did want a school consolidation. Next slide, please. And similarly, as we did tonight, we ask all of those that came through our booth, as well as having it done through a Mentimeter platform and in a written format for those that didn't wish to use a social media or a technology-based information, to rank their options. And as we saw tonight, a good portion of you are choosing more in line with the K-5 new at North Intermediate site and a consolidated larger school. That was again echoed as everyone's sentiments during the Fun on the 4th. Next, please. Another question that was asked again tonight, similarly during the Fun on the 4th, we asked if, regardless of the cost, understanding that the MSBA will only reimburse for only a portion, a smaller gymnasium, since this is considered an elementary school, if the community would be in favor of a larger gymnasium to support this project. That understanding that the larger gymnasium would have more opportunities for community use and be able to have a more inclusive approach. And majority of the people responded with saying, yes, they would be in favor of a larger gym, even if the MSBA would not contribute to all of the cost. Next slide. There are multiple ways of staying connected. As I mentioned a few of them earlier, we also do have a Wilmington Facebook page that we regularly post on, as well as the Wilmington Apple, the Wilmington Moms page, and we are also joined forces with the Pause group, which they have graciously included our content on their page in order to spread the information to a larger audience. There are multiple ways to stay connected, and if Ronnie, you wouldn't mind to the next slide. Please join us in coming to our meetings that we will be holding monthly, as well as all of these public forums. Stay tuned on all of our social media posts, but for those that are not on social media, we also do have an email address that you can direct questions, comments to, and we have been answering and trying to respond accordingly in a timely manner. Majority of the questions have wonderful insight as well as comments that has sparked a lot of great communication and conversations internally within our group, and as a result have created a more robust frequently asked questions section in on our Wilmington Public School project website. So we definitely welcome your feedback, all of your comments, and look to hear from you more as the progress of this project moves forward. Next slide. As we mentioned, there are some upcoming exciting meetings, one of which is on August 19th. It is the school committee meeting. This will be remote meeting via Zoom, and we urge you all to participate, as well as on that same evening, there will be a select board meeting, which will be held in person. On August 20th at 6:30 p.m., we will be holding our monthly school building committee, where we really would love your opinions, your feedback, in order to make the selection and the preferred option for the town that is unanimously supported by all. We would love to hear your thoughts, feedbacks through this Mentimeter platform, as Ronnie and Dorian Whittier stated, would be open for another week to come, in helping the school building committee make the decision that is right for our town. Thank you.
Well, at this time, I want to thank Ronnie, Julie, Vivian, and Eric, for your efforts in bringing our community up to speed on the Wildwood School Building project. Before we open up to questions and comments this evening from those in attendance, I just want to share a few things before we begin. First, please know that many members of our building committee are here this evening viewing the presentation and will be listening to feedback and comments. And if not this evening, certainly I know they will do so in the future with the recording. In addition to members of our design team and our owner's project management team, we also have on board and available our town manager to assist in fielding relevant questions that may be asked tonight. While we will do our best to respond to questions posed, it may not be possible to answer all questions tonight. We may have to follow up later should more information be needed or other individuals need to be contacted. In terms of my plan to navigate the public comment section tonight, I'd like to offer the following as our path forward. First, if you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please raise your virtual hand, and that's the yellow button on your screen. This will alert myself and our moderator, Mr. Ken Lord, our director of IT, who's helping out tonight, that you wish to comment. When called upon, your microphone will be unmuted. And when it is, if I can kindly ask you to share your name and your address before you begin. In order to try and keep things running and fair and equitable for those that may be wishing to comment, I'm going to try and stick to a 2-minute time limit for each person speaking tonight. It'll be my intent to allow those wishing to speak the opportunity to do so before returning to someone who has already spoken this evening, and I thank you for your understanding with that. So with all of that being said, let's begin, and I think we have a couple of hands raised. So popping up on my screen first, and I don't know if this is the order, but Mr. Allen. George Allen?
Can you hear me?
Mr. Lord, can you unmute?
Jennifer was actually first.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Mr. Allen. We'll come back to you. Ms. Benelli.
Jennifer Benelli, 17 Jacob Street. I've been tracking this project. You guys have done a wonderful job keeping us up to speed on the progress. Obviously, the costs are the newest pieces of information, and thus the one that I have the most questions on. So one, I guess these are mostly for the town manager, but perhaps you as well, Dr. Brand. I just want to understand in coming up with the tax estimates for the average person. Does that take into account what the town might contribute out of free cash or capitalization? The second, I don't know if you want to rattle them off. The second one is, does that include actually any contribution from the town? Like, for example, the town hall costs, admin building was just kind of absorbed into our normal tax rates. Like, is this 100% going to be on top of the normal tax rate? Or might this school building project be part of it? And then the third thing is, are we factoring in any savings to the town by running and maintaining fewer buildings, if not in year one, or over the course of time? And
Thanks.
those are my third.
I'll turn those over to our town manager, Mr. Slagle. I think you're on.
Thank you, Glenn. So those are really good questions. The numbers that were on the screen are estimates based on a debt exclusion for the total amount of the local share. Did not take into account a contribution from free cash, and we haven't factored any kind of reductions in operating costs into any of the costs. This is just the cost of the borrowing in itself. We anticipate, because of the scale of these projects, we would need to have a debt exclusion to cover the entirety of the cost.
I'll add in terms of the last question, Ms. Benelli, in terms of sort of cost savings, efficiencies from, if to understand your question correctly, going from, say, multiple buildings to fewer, that is certainly something that we have not yet at this point in time taken a deep dive looking at. However, from my past experiences and other sort of similar projects, that is absolutely information that we need to gather together to be able to provide the residents to make an informed choice around what adjustments in future department budgeting might be at play. As just one example, and I know that there will be many, transportation. Our student transportation system right now, as you would well be aware, if you know our community services multiple elementary schools. If we are reducing that total number to fewer, that certainly could have an impact, will have an impact to a degree on what the cost operations are on that service. Digging deeper in terms of just overall operations from utilities and so on, those are all important pieces of information that we will absolutely need to compile and be able to convey to residents in town to help make an informed choice going forward. Ultimately, when we are seeking a town vote for the project in the future.
If I could just add to that, Dr. Brand, it's one of the requirements for us in the next phase, the schematic design phase, will be to do just that, is to calculate some of the cost for savings potential in a consolidation. And we'll be looking at utilities. Currently, we can't estimate those costs because we have to make some decisions on what types of HVAC systems and energy efficiency measures will be taken into. We'll figure that stuff out in schematic design to be able to come back and present costs on the operational side for utilities and potential costs in the future. Also, I think we'll be working on the educational side too, to kind of work through some more detailed scheduling and staffing and be able to understand transportation needs better. So we'll be able to report better back more holistically on potential cost savings for consolidation. Once we pick one option, move forward, and that'll be reported out during the schematic design phase.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, Mr. Allen, I think you're up next.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. My name is George Allen. I live at Stonehenge Drive. Full disclosure here, my wife, Diane Allen, is a member of the PBC, and as such, she's part of this building committee. Now, I want to make perfectly clear right from the get-go. These opinions are mine and mine alone. They do not necessarily reflect the views of my wife. I've been a resident for 57 years in Wilmington, and I've been following this Wildwood project for about 5 years now. And as some of you may know, I get involved in all the other building projects in town. And this really started about 5 years ago when they were looking for temporary quarters for the kids from the Wildwood School. And the consultant evaluated 12 options and came back with some of the options were putting the portable trailers outside for the kids at various schools. Some of the prices for these emergency situations, $12 million. Thankfully, the town got involved and they came up with a solution which has worked out well. And that solution was to use available space in the middle school. They made renovations to that school. They adjusted classrooms, they adjusted bathrooms, and that has been working since. Now, regarding the current project, we're referring to it as the Wildwood School Building Project. I think perhaps a better name, so people will really understand, a better name would be Northside Schools Consolidation Building Project. Most people that I speak to in my circle still think this is about the Wildwood School. This is not about the Wildwood School. This is beyond the Wildwood School. And I know at the June meeting of the committee, which I watched, that issue came up. And there was discussion, yes, maybe we ought to either in-house or somehow talk about it and make people aware that it's more beyond the Wildwood School. I don't see anything being done in that regard, and people are still confused. Now, regarding some of the costs and impacts on the residents, at the July 23rd Building Committee meeting, information was provided regarding the project costs and effects on the taxpayers. And as was shown on the slide that the town manager showed, and by the way, kudos to the town manager and the staff and the finance department for putting these numbers together on quick turnaround. because I know for that, there was a big rush to get it for that July 23rd meeting. As the town manager indicated, those impacts are based on an average town home assessment of $683,790. And this is for the mega project, as I call it, which is the project at the North School K5. That would come out to $730 for that average home. Now, if you're in an $800,000 home and you can check your assessment on your tax bill, that goes up to $850, and it goes up proportionate. So you can figure it out. You can, for your own house, just take what your assessed value is, compare it to the 683, 790, and multiply it times 730. You'll find out how much more per year you'll be paying. Basically, I think what we're saying here is most people for the mega project, their tax bill is going to be in the range of $700 a year to $1,100 per year. And that, as the town manager said, and that is exclusive of normal budget increases. Another interesting thing is throughout this entire project and meetings, and I've listened to many of them, including tonight's, never once, maybe I missed it, never once have I heard the term Proposition 2.5 override. That's what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about a Proposition 2.5 override. And as most of you are aware, that's a two-step process, town meeting vote, and then you go to the polls to vote for it.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
A couple of more comments, Dr. Brand, that I was going to make have been touched upon, but I want to get to the gymnasium and the 12,000 square foot gymnasium versus the standard 6,000. Put that in perspective, and I saw the charts there, how everybody was willing to go for the larger gymnasium and everything else. It's a little disingenuous to ask that type of question without saying how much that is. And basically, and this came up at the June committee meeting, it's an additional $8.3 million that the taxpayers. Now, to me, and by the way, the gym, 12,000 square feet, that's what the high school has. Okay, so now we're talking about a gymnasium that we have in the high school, we're going to put it in an elementary school, and it's going to cost an additional $8.3 million so on our taxes. So I think that has to be clarified, and that information has to get out there. On another issue.
Mr. Allen, I'm sorry, but just could I just ask you to make, if you would kindly do this as your last point, we're over time, and I do want to respect those others that are in queue, and then we certainly can come back to you if there are others that are.
Okay, I'll come back, but the communication that was put, and I just want to, communication of information that was put up there was not completely accurate. But let me get to my summary then, Dr. Grant. In summary, I'm not in favor of any of these. So I didn't vote for any of those. In my opinion, we've got two options. Leave things as they are, or number two, go down to the Glen Road Town Hall, which was originally a school. It's the same as the Butwell School. Renovate that. In addition to that, the school committee should do a separate study just on town-wide for the entire town consolidation. It shouldn't be part of a construction project. This is only covering the north side of town. The west side of the town isn't going to see anything like this for 15 years. Thank you, Dr. Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I believe Ms. Feeney is next. Is that right, Mr. Lord?
Great, thank you. Michelle Feeney, 5 Arlene Ave. I have several questions, so I'll kind of just keep in that format. So I noticed that you had listed in the presentation that some of the flyers were distributed and some other communications. Did anything make it into the water bill? I don't think that it did. I'm just curious. I just want to be
The flyer had been inserted into the last quarter water bill. Unfortunately, we did not have time to do so in this quarter's water bill, but subsequently we have provided grassroots efforts to put it all throughout town.
Okay, can you share a copy of what that looks like? Because my biggest concern is the fact, and I think George just touched upon this, I myself did my own outreach, and what led me to this, and I've been doing since, and shared some communications with the town officials as well as the committee members. I've talked to 5 different groups within the town. None of them knew that this extended beyond the Wildwood School. So I just wanted to address that. I believe that, I think that the newest flyer, possibly, I want to thank you. I believe one of the committee members, Michael, has gone out of his way to do that. And I'd love to see it, though, to see if it really hammers home that this project has tripled from the Wildwood to 3 schools, because the shock and dismay that I saw when I told these folks, all different walks of life, I can get specific, but for the sake of time, I won't. But if any of the committee members would like to, or the town officials would care to call me, happy to have that conversation with the groups that I spoke with. They were all extremely disappointed to hear that. I also have been battered on Facebook because people are like, well, it's up to the person to keep in touch with what's going on. In my opinion, that is not true. When you call something the Wildwood School Building Project on every piece of communication, I, like most others, thought, okay, well, the biggest decision is going to be renovate, rebuild, or brand new. And I was happy with whatever this committee worked for 3 years on. I would be happy with whatever outcome. To suggest that people should proactively keep going in, thinking that it might be expanded, to 3, I think is a little tough to expect of any, rational person. My next question, so if you can share the flyer on this format, that would be great. Does anyone
Actually, Michelle, I just learned that Michael had dropped off a flyer for you, and it should be in your mailbox.
I can't, well, my computer's in here, so, and I'm only one person, so I think there may be other folks on this call that would like to see it, to see if it does highlight that this is expanded. So thank you. I will certainly go out there and grab it after, but I was hoping more for the sake of the 40-something people on the call. Which, by the way, again, 40 people Zoom call, Mentimeters. I did make a point in my letter that I think this is really tough for a large section of the population to follow along on Zoom, and then throw a Mentimeter on top of it. It's a little tough. Secondly, can we move the vote? I know you mentioned August 20th. I have mentioned this before. It seems after 3 years, I don't understand the rush, why everything is happening over the summer when you have the least amount of residents in town. It's vacation time, not a big focus. I'm just curious, has anyone even reached out to ask, or the MSBA, I think is on this call, if you could answer that or at least explore it?
Thank you, Ms. Feeney, for your comments.
I do have more, but if you could
Okay.
answer that one. If you can't answer or table it, that's fine. I just have questions about the cost. Does the cost include demolition or repurposing?
You know what, Ms. Feeney, can I just ask, we can come back to you, and just try to best navigate the time period, but I absolutely see the ability for us to circle back. So hold tight on that. But in terms of your cost, or sorry, your last question specifically around the time frame of latter part of August, and is it necessary to continue with this work over the summer, which is tough, and I think there's a clear understanding of everyone on the team that that's a challenge for this time of the year. I'll add a couple of things, and then I'll maybe ask our owner's project manager or Lee Dorr to just comment on this. But the time frame that we're under, the schedule that we're working on, led by our folks who know this business very well and who work regularly with MSBA, this is a schedule that we're on not because of our own liking or doing, but rather the schedule that has been set through the various facets of this work with the MSBA. There's a lot of depth and detail to their expectations for school districts and communities to align with, and there's a lot of process and procedures. And so it is unfortunate, but it is the case that the timeline of our project took us up to and is taking us through the summer. And that's what we're pressing ahead with. I don't know if Julie or Lee want to add anything more to that from what I added there, but.
Sorry, I was trying to unclick my mute button. No, Dr. Brand, I think you captured that well. The MSBA does have a process in which when we start this with each community, we set forth a schedule with the MSBA. And as we showed in those modules earlier, there are definite milestones that we need to hit with them. We are not the only project that is in the program. And so the MSBA works with all of the communities to make sure that they're all on a schedule and that we try and adhere to that as best as possible. We are discussing that amongst Doran Whittier, myself, and the town, if there is an opportunity to push the vote, but we haven't come to a final decision yet. Lee, did you want to add anything?
Oh, sorry.
No, I would just add to that moving the date is usually proves difficult for a lot of the reasons that were mentioned by Julie with the MSBA process. And part of it just has to do with timing of MSBA board meetings and votes and when they occur and kind of how this process progresses forward. And one of them being trying to get to a point where the town has some options of when to take this before town meeting. And so pushing out too much further into the summer, puts at risk potentially a spring town meeting and potentially could push it out further. And so one of the big things with this project and a project of this magnitude, regardless of the option, they're all big numbers, is they're based on schedules of when we anticipate the building being completed. And we factor in escalation costs, market conditions, et cetera. So currently these numbers that we've shared to you tonight all are based on assumptions of following the schedule that we're on and when this project would be able to be bid and go to market. Any changes in that potentially change some of the cost upwards of where we are now, right? Time isn't our friend on any construction project. So, that would have to be looked at as well and, decided upon kind of that, what are the implications potentially to cost on timing if any shifts to the schedule take place.
Thank you, Lee.
Oh,
Thanks,
sorry.
Julie. Okay, so stay tuned, Ms. Feeney. We'll come back, I promise. Miss Christy Tofori, from your last name correct, you're up next.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. Chrissy Tofieri, 91 Beacon Street. I just had a couple questions on the cost and tax impact slide. Maybe this is a question for Mr. Slagle. I was wondering if maybe perhaps putting a estimated tax impact per $100,000 of assessed value might be a good idea. Just thinking for the average, layperson. I know we've got the average single family home value, but just to have there as a simple multiplier. I know that not everybody is going to be in the $600,000 range, so just putting that out there. And then the second point or comment or question I had was with respect to the first payment. I know you mentioned it was a fixed principal, so the debt service or the cost is declining every year. Have you or anybody on the team given thought to presenting the ascending principal payment option structured like a mortgage? I know that there's some cost savings up front and it kind of pushes the debt load out to future years, but I know that other communities have presented it that way and for larger scale projects, and it kind of shows it as a less of a sticker shock.
Thank you for the questions. Mr. Slagle, do you want to comment?
Sure, thank you. I'll be honest, I thought about that when we were looking at the tax impact. When I talked it over with the finance director, the history in Wilmington has been to take on large scale debt like this at the descending cost. And so that's how we calculated it, but it's absolutely something that we can do and prepare and put on the website just to let folks know what it would look like if we did as you say, like a mortgage with an ascending principal cost. Also, I wanted to let you know that the team has already discussed and plans to have a tax calculator that we're going to put on a website where you can just plug in your assessed value of your property and it will show the tax impact. Right now, because there's so many different options, that's it's less doable. But once there's a preferred option, there will be a tax calculator that's prepared so that you can type in the exact assessed value from your tax bill, and it'll show you the estimated tax impact. But I hear what you're saying about an ascending cost, and I can certainly put that together.
Thanks, Mr. Schlegel. Mr. Ford, does that capture your questions?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks. I believe next is Mr. Neville, Scott Neville.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Brand. Scott Neville, 215 Chestnut Street. I have a couple of questions on the site location, or the sites themselves. To start with, and Mr. Dorr answered this a little bit, but when the town's been exploring locations for new buildings, including the town hall, school admin building, and the senior center, they prioritized sites that had natural gas and sewer line access. Have we done any long-term cost analysis on how these amenities will affect one site over the other? I believe the North Intermediate site has access to both of those, where the Woburn Street has access to neither one currently. I also had a question on the Woburn Street site, the pre-K to 3 building. From the PDP phase to the PSR phase, the estimates of the cost increased on that project. And the ledging on the site and retaining walls, I believe, was cited for the reasons for the increases. On the evaluation matrix, the sites had a 9.0 rating. I didn't know if these cost increases or challenges to the project would decrease that score or if that score remains the same. And one final one about the gymnasium. When does the committee need to decide on the gymnasium size? Does this need to be decided before the PSR vote, or if the committee were to choose a pre-K to 5 at the North Intermediate site, could they change the gymnasium size after that vote has been made? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neville. All great questions. I think all for you, Lee, most of those.
Sure, thanks. Scott, those are very good questions. We did evaluate the sites, and you are correct. The north site does have utilities available to it, whereas some of the other sites may have a few utilities but require a septic system plan. So those have been taken into consideration in the cost estimates for the differences in those, and that's part of some of the reason in your later question why the Woburn Street site costs are increased higher than the relative cost that North went up between PDP and PSR. The category on the matrix related to site involves quite a few different inputs. And Ronnie, maybe you can just pipe in a little bit on the fine art of those different details of that.
Sure thing. So within each of the 8 categories that we flashed up on the screen earlier, there's several criteria that are scored within the categories, and then those are summed and averaged to create or to generate the category scoring. And in the site category, for example, utilities is one of the criteria, but there's actually 15 criteria within the site category. So when it was all factored together, the Woburn Street site still scored a 9, as you mentioned, even though there were some slight changes in the individual criteria, the overall score was a 9. And so that's where you're seeing that what seems to be a higher score, but it does factor in the utilities because that was part of the criteria.
And just to your question, Scott, about the change in site costs from the PDP phase to the PSR phase, specifically for the PK3 at Woburn, the way that was estimated at PDP when we were really early on and had very little information put together, site costs were factored in the estimate as a percentage of the overall building cost. When we got to this next phase, we were able to collect more data, more topographic information. We were able to do a little bit of preliminary work on what those retaining walls would need to look like, what the depth of them need to be, what the linear footage would be. So lots more detail to calculate. So that's why the PSR estimates are a little bit more detailed, and that same cost that was carried for the pre-K to 5 option, that actually went down because with the detail that we had, we were carrying too much in the initial estimate. Whereas at the Woburn Street site, we added the detail and we weren't carrying enough in that estimate. So that's why that change happened. So as we progress through these phases and we have more time to do more investigations and more design and engineering work, we get more answers to these detailed questions, which inform our estimates better.
And Lee, the last question was about the gymnasium.
So the last question is about the gymnasium, and that's the difficult one, and it has to do with schedule. Once the preferred option is selected, right, we would be submitting this right now after the August 20th vote to the MSBA for their review and comments and to get ready for them to evaluate it at an upcoming meeting. We have a very short time duration during schematic design to put all of the information that's required before our next submission. And to carry basically 2 options moving forward in schematic design, one with a large gym, right, twice the size as the other one, as you can imagine, it impacts the geometry of the floor plan quite a bit. It impacts the geometry of how the site plan goes together. It also impacts, right, calculations on when we're starting to figure out what are the utility systems and HVAC systems to heat and cool the building. So it's something that we would really like to try and get nailed down early in the SD phase. Can you have a conversation about it early on? Yes, but it's going to have to be buttoned up pretty tight for us to have enough time to be able to produce the design documents required for that next submission with MSBA. Hope that clarifies that.
Thanks, Lee. And thank you, Mr. Neville, for your questions. I think Ms. Bourgeois, Jess Bourgeois, you are up next.
Hi, Jess Bourgeois, 7 Stone Street. I just wanted to make a quick comment on people who I've been following this project for a long time. My kids are actually now out of the school system, but I'm still interested in it as a community member. I just wanted to make a quick comment on the people who seemed confused about whether it was a Wildwood project or an elementary school project. If you look back on the history of it, the town manager actually signed the memo in like 2019 that clearly stated it was about consolidation and included all of the schools. So that was followed up with a Board of Selectmen meeting like in 2020, and all the statement of interest that were submitted to the MSBA clearly stated that it was all of the schools. So I think that's been kicking around for a long time. I don't think it's ever been just the Wildwood. That's just how it was originally named. But it's always been about all the schools and possibilities of consolidation. So I also wanted to just thank you guys for this great presentation. I think from following along, it's been a good summary of all of the previous meetings. And I guess I don't really have a question, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sarah Sheehan is up next. Ms. Sheehan, are you there?
Apologies. Hi, apologies. Sorry, I didn't realize I had to unmute. Can you hear me now?
We can. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Sarah Sheehan, 29 Marcus Road. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who presented tonight. I think the presentation's been great. I've been lucky enough to sit in on several of these meetings. I think the communication's been fantastic. I just have a couple of comments and one question. So my son was at the Wildwood when it shut mid-year in 2022, and he won't benefit from the new school as he'll likely be moving to the middle school by the time it opens. And while the state of the Wildwood is what's instigated this project, It has provided such an opportunity, and I'm so relieved to see that so many people here support school consolidation. I believe that having as many students benefit from the new school is incredibly important, as many students as possible. I also believe that maintaining a single building going forward seems to be the fiscally responsible choice. And while the cost to the town residents is daunting, it's pay now or it's pay later, because all of the schools are going to need replacing or major renovations as time goes by. And finally, the sooner we get the north side of town done, the sooner that we can do it on the west side of town, so all of our students can benefit. I really think that that's really the most important thing. However, my question is, if we do consolidate through the 5th grade at the north location, which does seem to be the popular choice, and I'm definitely a fan of, what happens to Woburn Street and the Wildwood Street sites? And is it possible that either the sale or leasing of those locations could help mitigate the cost of the project to taxpayers?
Thank you for the question. It is a great one. They're all great questions for sure tonight. I'm going to turn that to our town manager.
Thank you. And thank you for that question. I think, so I am not, I will speak my opinion first, which is, as a town manager, I am not in favor of divesting the town of any of the properties should consolidation happen. However, what I'd like to point out is the process that would need to be gone through. So the first thing that would have to happen, if there was a consolidation and there one or more schools were vacated, is the school department would have to turn over that school back to the town. That's a process that the school department would have to take up, and that would have to happen first. Then there would be a committee created by the Board of Selectmen. They are currently discussing that. They had a meeting. They've had several meetings where that committee has been brought up. And so I anticipate that committee being chosen relatively soon. That committee would then study the reuse of any building that the town had jurisdiction over. So if the schools became those buildings, then they would study that reuse. They would make a recommendation to the select board. So then the select board would take that recommendation, and it would be within their purview to take action on it. However, if there was a choice to do something like lease the property or sell the property, the first thing that would have to happen is I, as the town manager, would need to declare it surplus, and then there would have to be a vote at town meeting to either enter into a lease or to do some other transfer of title to that property. Again, I'm not inclined at this time to do that. I've seen the need that the town has for space for lots of different things, but those are the processes that would need to be gone through before that was was finalized.
Thanks, Mr. Slagle. And I hope that captures response to your question, Ms. Sheehan. And thanks for asking. Ms. Galezo, you are up next.
Glenn, I'm all set. I have my answer to my question. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I think Dawn. Dawn, you're up next. Dawn, are you there?
Yeah, just trying to unmute. Can you hear me now?
You can, thank you.
Yeah, a lot of good information coming out. Thank you. So my question is, so if we promote the mega site and it involves a Prop 2.5 override of a lot of money, the most money, this is the most expensive option. If the town votes it no, then we lose all state funding. Is that correct? Is this a one-time deal?
I'll ask, thank you, Don, for the question. It is a great one. Julie, as our owner's project manager, can you speak to the ramifications of that, should that play out?
I can, yes. If this does not pass a town vote, then we will need to go back, have a conversation with the MSBA However, the funding for this project would be in jeopardy. We would need to go back, have a conversation with them about a path forward within the community.
Thank you.
If I could say something just real quick, I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah, no worries.
And I a couple of times somebody has mentioned a Prop 2.5 override, and I think the process is correct. There would have to be a town meeting vote and then a ballot question. But we'd be looking as, rather than an override, we'd be looking at a debt exclusion. So I just wanted to make that kind of clear. The process would be the same. There would be a town meeting vote, and then there would have to be a ballot vote. But the debt exclusion is only for the specific project, and then as the project gets paid down, those funds go away. Whereas an override would be a permanent change to the tax rate, and that's not what we're proposing. We're proposing a debt exclusion, which is just for this project, and then the funds are no longer in the general fund after the project is over. Just to be clear.
Good to know. Okay, thank you. But there is a path forward if that does get rejected. Maybe, sort of, I guess. My other question is, with no sound ordinance in place currently, and with this big, large construction projects, how's the noise going to be handled, trying to teach and with the abutters?
Lee or Ronnie, is that a question?
Sure. It's a great question. As with any construction project, and if any of you have lived around them, they're noisy, they're dusty. There's no question about it. We do introduce mitigation measures as part of the contract for the contractor to try and reduce noise to within certain thresholds. We have taken it into consideration with the placement of the buildings on the site, trying to locate them so they're not directly against, abutters in any direction. There's certainly, as the project progresses and a site is picked, there'll be more discussions with abutters directly around the property. I think that communication up front is pretty important, so everybody knows what's going on and what the expectations would be, during a construction period. But it's a great question. Certainly there's some ongoing issues. We've built buildings, as close as 25 feet next to existing buildings during construction. This is nowhere near that, and some of the things that we're proposing, except for that addition renovation projects, which we've mentioned at several meetings, are fairly invasive and are more challenging, obviously, than the new. But it's something that we would be communicating about often, and trying to do our best efforts to mitigate. But certainly, it's a construction site.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, I've gotten that answer. It's a construction site. Meanwhile, they've been operating at 89 decibels, which is quite loud. Anyway, last question. When this is all said and done, when will the west side be going to be addressed? And would there not be any state funding with a new mega school for the west side? So would that be about a $2,000 hit for our taxes after?
So I'll take a pass at that, Don. I think a couple of things. First off, depending on what the preferred option is to move forward, I would imagine that most, I can't speak for the school committee, but certainly as one entity, but I think even broader, would really have a desire to try and keep uniform, a parallel track of schools on both sides of towns. As a superintendent, I couldn't imagine different tracks. By tracks, I mean different grade levels and different buildings necessarily. I think that's a variation that community members at large, I can't imagine would also desire. So there has not been a discussion about that yet. Obviously, first and foremost, it's trying to move forward with a preferred option and advance that forward successfully. But in terms of your question around, is possible funding sort of dried up? Is that no longer available for Wilmington? What I've come to learn, not just through this project, but other projects, is MSBA is really looking to help support communities that have the most need. And as a community, we demonstrated a considerable amount of need in our application for the Wildwood based upon the condition of that building, as well as the other buildings. We have a lot of need in our elementary stock, and so you never know about what other communities are vying for fiscal dollars and resources at the point of application. But as a community, and in conjunction, obviously, with the town manager's office, the select board, and the school committee, we would certainly have to engage in conversations around, and the finance committee around, how we are to move forward with this. So it's premature to certainly go down that path, but it's certainly something that I know and I've heard is on many people's minds in terms of, so what next, and what will happen, for the west side of town.
So one last follow-up, would that be like a time frame? Would that be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? What's the projected time frame down the road here?
My understanding is it's possible for a community to apply. It would be possible for us to apply in the next cycle that opens up. You can't have two, my understanding, and Lee or Julie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't have two projects going on at the exact same time at the same stages, but they never would be at the same stages, clearly, because this project is ahead of the other. Each project takes, MSBA provides usually a time frame to expect between 5 to 7 years from beginning of invitation towards school opening, generally speaking. But it is something that we could, as a community, should we wish to, put forth application to MSBA as soon as the next cycle. Lee and Julie, I don't know if you want to add to that or clarify anything.
No, I think you handled that one, Glenn. In my opinion, that when the next cycle opens after the first of the year, once the one preferred option is chosen here, you can start submitting statement of interest for the remaining schools in the district. And as you mentioned, the MSBA program is a needs-based program. And so they really do go and look at all of the people that submit their statements of interest and determine which schools are in the most need. So
I think the final point in this, and just, I know many know this, but maybe not everyone, school communities, and we hear about them frequently, at least I do in conversation with my colleagues. There are many, many communities that apply multiple times to the MSBA before they get invited in. And that could be for a whole host of reasons. I know that some have suggested that we may have gotten lucky because we applied the first time and got invited in. I don't think my colleagues here would disagree. I don't think it was about luck. It was about our demonstration of need. And at that point in time, in that application cycle, our applications were able to rise to the top. So it doesn't mean that will happen again. And it may take many application years to eventually be invited in, as is the case for lots of other communities that are not too far from here that are seeking this kind of grant funding.
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Don. I think next we have, I don't know who the last name is, but Barbara. Barbara, are you there?
I think she dropped off.
Thanks, Ken. Next is Suzanne Kroll.
Hi, my name is Sue Kroll, 21 Blueberry Lane. So I currently am an educator in Wilmington and I work at the Woburn Street. I'm also a parent, but my kids will be at the middle school. And I just wanted to reiterate as an educator what I think how important this decision is now for our future children and staff. I think that having a newer building, pre-K through 5 at the north is our best option, especially since the price difference isn't that much between renovating and new. And as someone who's gone through a renovation, and there always seems to be more problems once you knock down walls and are going through the process, there's always extra hidden costs too in renovation. I also wanted to note that I had the opportunity to visit one of the elementary schools in Tewksbury. And they had a very large gymnasium, and the principal there said how they use their gymnasium for school gatherings during the day when they need to meet with the students all day. So I just wanted to note that too, because I know there's a lot of question about the larger gymnasium and if it's worth the extra money. But if you're going to have a pre-K through 5 school and you need a place to meet, or even to have, sometimes they have in-school field trips. You need a place for the students and staff to all meet together, and, you know, we won't have an auditorium like we do at the middle school and high school. So I just wanted to note that. Thank you, and thank you everyone for your commitment to this and for meeting tonight on a sunny summer night. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Next, actually, Barbara, I see you're back on. Are you there?
Yeah, sorry about that. I fell off for a second. My question is really about contingency planning, because my understanding, and I think you've said this, you know, the elementary schools, you know, all are very aged. And so I guess when I think about consolidation, it seems like such an opportunity for us to sort of solve multiple problems, you know, on the north side of town. I guess the question is, if either we choose like just the you know, Wildwood, or if we choose K through 3, or if, you know, the town doesn't go through. I guess my question maybe for the town is, how are we sort of planning to sequence and address these buildings if we choose not to sort of solve the north side collectively at this time?
Thanks, Barbara. Mr. Slagle, do you want to respond to that?
I can give it a try. That's a tough question. So what I'm hearing is what you're saying is, if for some reason what the school committee chooses to do doesn't go forward. And I think our consultants kind of touched back on that a little bit earlier, which is our first option would be to go back to the state and say, you know, can we, you know, we had a vote that didn't go through. Can we negotiate with the state about getting back in, you know, getting in line? That is unlikely, but that would be our first attempt. If that didn't work, we'd be looking at a possibility of having to self-fund a project without the state's involvement. And so we'd have to go back to that, you know, that the matrix that we looked at and look at the projects and say, these are the ones, this is the cost. The local share is going to be a lot more now because the state's not involved. And so is there an appetite to take on a smaller project and pay a much larger share of it? I don't think we have that answer right now. You know, I mean, I think the default, I think, would be to go and say, okay, we're just going to renovate the Wildwood for $29 million, but that may not be the choice of the town at the time. Maybe they want to build a new one and just self-fund it. So it's tough to answer that question, but what the process is, we would have to think about whether or not to put forward a proposal for a self-funded school.
Yeah, for the Wildwood, certainly. If we did something like that, then we would still have 2 other elementary schools on the north side to consider, as well as beginning to think about the west side. So what I was trying to sort of raise and sort of ask a little bit about is, like, if not now, then are we talking like, you know, a school every 5 years? You know, if we choose not to do consolidation, you know, I mean, it's just like the projects are lined up. So I guess, you know, my concern is really around what happened with the Wildwood and additional failures and sort of loss of productive learning environments, and how long are we willing to sort of do that? So understanding the trade-offs between sort of this opportunity right now, right, to solve a lot of problems. It costs a lot, and sort of recognizing that, but also there's impact. If we choose not to do that, then I guess, you know, what does that look like? And I think understanding, you know, what we're sort of positioning ourselves, either this, or we're sort of looking at a 15-year or a 20-year renewal plan.
The other thing I wanted to kind of make clear is even the smallest scale project on that list will still require a debt exclusion. So there's not a project, even, you know, if we're self-funding the non-renovation, we're going to lose out on state funding, you know, the matching reimbursement that we get from the state for a new pre-K through K, or for any of the consolidation options. And self-funding even the smallest project is still going to require a debt exclusion, so it's still going to require a town meeting vote, and it's still going to require a ballot question to get passed for the debt exclusion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Still going in order. Judy O'Connell, next.
Thank you, Glenn. Can you hear me? I just want to make sure that you can hear me.
You can hear you.
Thank you. So I just want to let you know that my comments, I had raised my hand prior when Dawn was speaking. So this isn't necessarily in direct response to the last question or the comments that Town Manager Slagle had made, and they are all excellent points. I just wanted to share this because I think it should be shared, because some of the people that I'm learning your names, and it's a pleasure to meet you. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you previously or speaking to you previously. And I just wanted to give a friendly reminder to everybody on this call that the town has spent every year at an annual town meeting basically petition articles and warrant articles that have been driven by the town manager's office, and most notably the select board, that include anywhere from $1 to $5 million a year in capital improvement projects. So I know that we've done some major milestone events, i.e. a public safety building, a middle school, a new high school, where it makes strategic sense to work with MSBA, which we did for the high school, to get a new school online. And sometimes you have to make a town business decision when you want to take a building and it's reached its end of its useful life and get a new building online, and we've done that. But in the meantime, I want to just remind people that we have made some major capital improvements into the schools in the meantime. One school, for example, you know, I'm looking at a list of things that we've done in the last 10 years. We've done roofs, windows, heating systems. For example, a $719,000 window project that we used part of MSBA funding to do. We replaced boilers at this school for $474,000. We've replaced a roof at this school for $640,000. We've installed 4 split AC units to the tune of $60,000, and we've done an LED lighting project for $145,000. And in a few instances, we've done fire alarm upgrades to the tune of $247,000. So I just want to put the taxpayers at ease in knowing that we're not just waiting for large school projects like this to take action in our schools. And that's a credit, you know, to the town and the taxpayers to see the validity of you know, approving these expenses. It's also a credit to Dennis Kelly's team and the building department to bring these projects forward. So, you know, in the midst of not having new school projects or major renovation projects, I just want to let people know that there is service and upgrade being done with the dollars that we have, you know, and we've been doing that for decades, and we'll continue to do that. So I do believe that those comments have their rightful place in this conversation, because we're not just waiting, you know, for the big votes. We're doing everything year after year to try and maintain what we have. And I think that should be stated publicly. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Okay, so I believe we have hit or reached out to everyone who has wished to speak, and now we're going to return to those that have already spoken. And so, Mr. Allen, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if you still have comments you'd like to share?
Could I just have a couple of minutes?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to follow up on regarding the public outreach that was said at one of the articles in terms of a meeting at the senior center. Let me tell you about that meeting at the senior center. There were 3 people there. Me, my wife, Audrey Reed. And why was that? That was because the notice of that meeting with the building, with the architects and consultants, the notice didn't get into the senior center newsletter in time. So the senior center director called me up and I told him I could fill it into my busy schedule. Yeah, right. So we went down. Yes, and we asked some good questions. And at that meeting, Audrey brought up the point. Why are we talking about all these other schools? I thought it was only the Wildwood. So that's the meeting that was shown. Now, I understand that apparently there's going to be one sometime in September at the senior center. Hasn't been set yet, but that's what I hear. It may not happen. But if it does, what's the point? The decision has been made. The town is moving forward. And apparently the opinion of the 3,241 seniors that are registered at the senior center don't get a chance to weigh in on it. And by the way, the recent population figures show that Wilmington, 22% of the population is over 60. That translates into $5,000, 5,000 people. Many of these seniors are on fixed income. And when they have to pay $700, $800, I mean, I don't like this cavalier attitude about throwing $1 million around. Money matters to a lot of these people. And we need to pay attention to them. We need to get input to them. And seniors vote. Thank you, Dr. Brand.
Oh, Miss Feeney, you're up next if you still had questions or comments you wanted to share.
Yes, I want to echo those same sentiments. And in fact, we do have over 23,000 residents. I just have a question quickly. So the cost of, I want to say that I think 1,100 is probably an average for that tax override. That will be for what, the next 25, 30 years? I guess I'll ask that for the town manager.
Yeah, so again, the average cost would be $730 for the highest building. That's the average tax increase for the average single family. So I mean, I guess what that means, just to be clear, is there's the same number of people below that line as there is above that line. So the same values below as above. But so that, as I mentioned, those numbers take into account 30 years of debt, but it's on a descending scale. So while it starts at, say, $730 in year 1, by year 30, it's less than half of that. So
okay. Well, some people won't be around to see that. So I guess I going off of what was just said, I really hope, and you know, listen, there were 41 people here, but it doesn't speak, you know, I've heard it mentioned, there were memos and things. You're not reaching, and I don't know how many more ways to say this. There are, I've counted 5 groups that I spoke with that had no idea about this. And I did have my husband run out to get the flyers. So thank you. It does mention the 3 schools, but that cost is going to drive people out of the town. And by the time we have the senior center, some people won't even be here to use that. I think to ask residents across the entire town to have that sort of bill annually, while only half the town benefits from it, I think really is a huge part to consider. The other thing I want to ask is, at the town meeting, I know that the Woburn Street School, it was talked about renaming it for the folks that donated that land. What happens to that? I believe the Woburn Street School, if that gets decommissioned, what happens to that land? Are we going to honor that what it was donated for? I would ask that of the town manager, or I think if there's anyone from the school committee here. I think some members of the committee are actually on the school committee as well.
Yeah, so I can respond just kind of generally, which is, as I mentioned before, whatever's going to happen with any of the properties, if there is a decommissioned property, is going to have to go through a public process that's going to require multiple different committees and boards, including potentially up to and including town meeting, to take action on something. I've shared my opinion, which I'm not inclined to divest the town of any property. I don't think that makes sense in this at the current time. So the ultimate use of those properties would come down to, assuming they were turned back over to the town, you know, a public process with the committee on reuse and a determination by the select board as to what they believe the best use of that property would be going forward.
Okay, and this next question is for, I guess, is it Lee Dorr? I hope I get it right. When you were evaluating the North Intermediate site, was there any sort of like groundwater or water table evaluation done? That field is historically known for severe flooding. Was that looked at?
We did, Ms. Feeney, we have looked at the flood maps for that particular property. We have taken into account, as part of the calculations in the estimate for managing stormwater in and around the building and around the entire site. We haven't gone in and done full borings yet, which we would do wherever the preferred site is selected to find out exactly where the water table is. We use historic data that the state provides on all properties of kind of some basic thresholds of soil types and water depths. We would be going in much more detail with the preferred option and the preferred site to know exactly where that is, so we can engineer and design the building around those parameters.
What happens? Oh, so the next question, I guess, is for the MSBA. Where does the funding come from? Is that from tax money?
Yes, that is from tax money. So for every dollar you spend on sales tax, they take 1 penny of that dollar and put it into a fund. And that fund is used to help communities.
Okay, so it's our tax money somehow that we're getting back into this. Okay. And what happens if the town says no? Are there any fiscal obligations that the town owes if we decide, if the town votes no?
So the process is, if the town votes no, you have to submit reasons for your failed vote to the MSBA. And then you have to give a remedy as to what you're going to do to get a successful vote. If you cannot provide that information to the MSBA, then they will withdraw their funding. So I mentioned earlier the funding.
Yeah, not the funding. I'm so sorry. What I mean is, like, it seems like a lot of work has been done, and I'm sure that, you know, they don't work pro bono. So have we incurred a bill thus far with either Dorr and Whittier or the SMMA or the OPM or, you know, that Wilmington, if the vote's no, we walk away, does Wilmington owe any entity money at that point?
Yes, both SMMA and Dorr and Whittier are billing the project to the town monthly for the duration up through schematic design.
Okay, do we have estimates on that I won't ask now, but can we get those costs from the town manager? Okay.
Yep, if you want to submit a Freedom of Information Act to the town manager, they can provide that information to you.
I mean, I would think, like, on a call like now, is that not something that we can share, the monthly costs of what, and when did that monthly cost start incurring?
When our contracts were executed. So back in 2023.
Okay.
I'll just add to that, Ms. Feeney, that the appropriation for undertaking this feasibility study with the MSBA was approved at a town meeting several years ago. I can't remember exactly what the total amount was, around $1 million.
1.2 million.
Okay, I can remember that. Okay.
And as a part of that, to your question, if the project fails at a vote and it's kind of tabled, the town is already approved that amount of money. The MSBA has agreed to reimburse a portion of that for the study that's undertaken. So that would be what would be left to the town. If the town got back in the pipeline again after a failed vote, I'm pretty sure their rules would say that the town would have to undertake that feasibility study, because you'd have to go through the similar process again, would be undertaken 100% by the town, whereas in this round they're reimbursing for part of it.
Okay. I appreciate those answers. I will say, I think if we still have approximately 41 people on here, I really want to point out, I've seen the Mentimeter surveys. I've seen the surveys that were handed out on the Common, and I would advise the committee that you do not have all the decision makers on this call on those surveys. The decision makers will be at the polls. And I know that I am going to be very active in getting the word out, because these meetings, these surveys, and this information, in my opinion, and for what I've seen, is going into more of an echo chamber with the same people. Maybe we get a few more here and there, but I would advise the committee not to get too confident that if you choose the most expensive, there is a very real possibility that it will not make the town vote. And I would advise you to if there's a more amenable or compromise that is a little more palatable and fiscally reasonable for the town, I think that should seriously be considered. You can't go by what's on this meeting. If someone were smart enough to do the Zoom, the Mentimeter is a really tough thing to navigate. So that's all I'll say. I appreciate. I encourage any of the committee members to call on. I had a nice discussion today with Michael. I would love to talk to more folks about some of the concerns that I have. I do plan to share as many pieces of information as you can respond to from my letter, and I will make it, around town so that people are aware of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Benelli.
Looks like she just dropped.
Mr. Neville?
Thank you, Dr. Brand.
Ms. Benelli was able to rejoin.
We'll come back in a second, but Mr. Neville, you have the floor.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for the great discussion tonight. There's been a lot of great questions and a lot of excellent answers. So I really appreciate that. I want to talk or ask some questions about the North Intermediate School. In the presentations that we've been seeing, if we choose a pre-K to 3 option at the Woburn Street site, there have been cost estimates to repair the north, estimated at $32.4 to $35.8 million. I have some questions about those. One is that in current day dollars, or do those numbers include cost multipliers for inflation if the work is done down the road? What work is included in these estimates? What will the work that's being done, will it displace students? And if so, does that estimate include the cost of mobile classrooms, which we've seen is a very high price? As the town's been discussing consolidation in the schools, these schools are 60 plus years old, we found that our buildings are inefficient for what is expected of modern educational facilities. Does this cost factor in updating the schools to a more modern educational facility, or is this just to keep the buildings running? I had a question. Ms. O'Connell did an excellent job bringing up capital projects that the town has been doing, undertaking each year to keep the schools running. Do we know how much we spent on capital projects on the North Intermediate in the last 10 years or so, just to get an idea of how much we've put into that school? And another question on the North Intermediate is, does that school have air conditioning? And how many if it does, how many classrooms are air conditioned? And finally, if I can make one point, about the surveys undertaken and the Mentimeter, I do agree that it is a small portion of the population that has been taking those. The town has had one vote where anybody in the town has been allowed to voice with a vote their feelings on the school project. That was on March 8th of 2022. When we voted for a feasibility study. In that meeting, it was discussed that school consolidation was a factor that we were going to consider. We had discussed looking at many of the schools in Dr. Brand's presentation. He had mentioned that. And the vote was taken after zero public comment, with around, I think it was estimated around 100 people still waiting in line to even get in. And the vote was 368-1 in favor of funding for schools to do work on our schools. If that vote doesn't tell you that the educational facilities need to be addressed and the community is willing to support these projects, I don't know what will. That was a vote. So that wasn't a survey or anything, and that was the town saying, we need this. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neville. Number of good questions there. Lee, I suspect you're taking note on a good number of those. Some of those, Mr. Neville will have to respond and follow up, certainly. But Lee, do you want to take a stab at the first?
Sure, I can take a first pass at a couple of those. The cost representing the repair only options, they include a scope of work that we put together for capital improvements to extend the life of those buildings by approximately 50 years. It includes no scope to change any of the footprint or the floor plan of the building or improve educational programs by moving walls or anything around. It's simply infrastructure. We evaluated each of the building with a team of architects and engineers. We noted all the existing deficiencies as compared to today's current codes. And we put an itemized report together that I believe is published and is on the website. It was part of the PDP submission to MSBA that includes a line-by-line cost breakdown of what the actual scope items are and how much they cost. They're based in today's dollars, and they're done so. We realize you probably wouldn't execute a project like that at once because it is challenging and you have students in the building. The costs do factor in some phasing costs to be able to move children into temporary facilities while we make portions of the building available for renovation. It's only to bring them up to current codes. And there are a lot of, and we've talked about this at length with some of the leadership group and certainly on the town side too, of how you'd attack a project like that. And our best way to approach it is to give you costs in today's dollars, because that's going to be the cheapest cost to execute if you did it all at once. If you spread those repair projects out over time with escalation and mobilization and remobilization for the contractors, the cost will increase from what we've illustrated. Regarding your other questions, Mr. Neville, on the 10 years of costs at North Intermediate for capital improvements that have spent to date, I think the town has some information on that, as well as some AC. There's very limited AC at the North School. I believe it's in a couple of classrooms maybe, and some limited administrative areas, but certainly not throughout the whole school. But I don't know if someone on the Dennis or Eric, you could talk to
I can speak to that. Just broadly speaking, none of our elementary schools have full central air conditioning at all. There are window air conditioners in some of the classrooms, I would say, in all of the elementary schools. Those, though, are for, generally speaking, either students requiring special needs and requiring that type of environmental accommodation, and also those that are in some of the offices where staff are working full year. But aside from that, our elementary schools, and quite honestly, the same is true for our middle school, are unair conditioned. And I know that this comes up frequently from members of the community, and the question around why and the costs to retrofit for air conditioning would be exorbitant, and certainly not something that there are any plans to pursue. The capital needs, we will have to get back to you, Mr. Neville, on that for the north. That's a good question, and thank you for posing that.
I think Judy O'Connell actually has the answer to that. If Judy can
okay,
and speak to that number.
Thank you. So just wanted to answer, Scott, your question regarding the north. So in the past 10 years, and just so you know, I received this information from Dennis Kelly. In the past 10 years, there has been a window replacement project with MSBA as part of it for $719,686.75. Boilers were replaced there at a cost of $474,000. The roof was replaced there for $640,500. There was a replacement or an install of 4 split AC units for $60,000. They have replaced all the lighting to LED for $145,000. And in some instances, there has been some fire alarm upgrades. So the total spent in that school in the past 10 years is $2,286,814.75. Regarding the North Intermediate School classrooms, they are only partially cooled. The first floor has 10 classrooms with a split AC and 1 without an AC. The second floor has 1 classroom with an AC and 10 without AC. The nurse's office, CARES office, principal's office, and the teacher's lounges all have AC units in them.
I should also, thank you, Judy. I should also add that some of the classrooms at the north have AC in those rooms that school is used for summer programming for our CARES. And I know that CARES programming has contributed, my understanding, to costs for some of those units as well. But thank you, Judy, for that information.
My pleasure.
Mr. Bendel, you're up next.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. Good evening, everyone. There's been some excellent feedback, some great questions here this evening, and I don't want to take up any time because I've enjoyed listening to everybody's feedback. I did want to make 2 points very briefly, if I may. The first is, which is disappointed to hear that the OPM wants to direct a resident who asked a simple question to a Freedom of Information Act, when we can simply give you that answer. Don't quote me on the exact number, but I believe we're paying SMMA currently $39,000 per month. So hopefully that answers Ms. Feeney's simple question about some of the cost. I know we've spent north of about $2 million thus far on this project. So hopefully that's helpful, and you can save yourself the trouble of going through the Freedom of Information Act. And also, I just wanted to emphasize that the August 19th meeting of the Board of Selectmen will be in person at Town Hall, and it begins at 7 p.m. And I would really encourage everyone to attend if they want to continue this conversation. So thank you for that. I just wanted to offer those 2 points.
Randall, thank you. Dr. McCaldy.
Hello. Yeah, so I'm just speaking for myself here. So just to let everyone know, I have 2 kids. One has made it through Wildwood, Woburn in the north, and one is currently going to be entering the north. And I just haven't heard much of the parent perspective here. And I think it's really great that we have some people that don't have kids currently in school and starting to engage and listen in. So I figured I can give some of my experience here to them, just to show them like maybe things have changed since the last time they had children here or anything like that. I think what's been said before, I can confirm, and I think my children can confirm, the schools, while they have been maintained over the years, they've kind of all approached their end of life, really, for delivering a high quality education. The North Intermediate School used to be a middle school, and you can tell when you're walking through that building, it's definitely chopped up in a way that's very challenging for the kids to navigate. And some of the classrooms still have kind of relics of its former life of the middle school, which really isn't conducive to that elementary school environment as well. All the transitions and navigating multiple pickups from after school cares, I can speak for myself, but I know there's countless parents that have expressed a lot of frustration and a lot of challenges with that. because the schools do end around the same time, and trying to navigate drop off and pickups is such a challenge with all the transitions of all the schools too. So, it's very understood that the initial cost can give people some sticker shock here. What I would like to ask though is, while we will have people who will take a look at the costs, see if anything can be done to mitigate it, kind of taking a step back and thinking about the impact on the people that are using the facilities, the children and the parents, and kind of the challenges that they're having right now with the current system, with what we currently have. And I think someone said this earlier, that this is a very rare and great opportunity for, I think, us as a town to come together to really support our children and our families here in town, to really help do this for a lot of them. And if we don't do this and let inertia take over, we'll stay with what we have. These problems won't go away that I just kind of highlighted. So that's all I have to say, but thank you for the time, and really appreciate everyone calling in here.
Thank you, Dr. McCaldy. Ms. Benelli.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to, emphasize, reaching more of the public is so important. So I would encourage all of us to really do that. I think they said that the Mentimeter would be open for a week. I know I personally have kind of organized a group to get together at the United Methodist Church this Sunday at 11:45. All are always welcome to just come in. We'll have some food and coffee and snacks, and have this presentation available, and give that assistance to the seniors, because if you've been to church, it's mostly seniors, to where to email their questions and concerns, and how to produce the Mentimeter. And I would encourage all of us to engage in this. It's okay to point fingers, but you are empowered to share this information and reach those people. So that's so important. The other thing is, I want to thank you for talking about a lot of the maintenance improvements that have been done. As anyone who does any maintenance on old things know, eventually you just have to, give up and buy a new car, because you're just putting bad money after good. In fact, we talked about that a lot when the new senior center and school admin building were approved. So I do want to, we are doing a lot, but there just becomes a point where you just can't do anymore. It's bad money after good. And then the last thing I just wanted to ask the committee is to just put more emphasis from the teachers and really talking about, particularly those who could see the new school tours, on the educational improvements, because all the improvements we've made are not improvements. They're maintenance. They're maintaining the roof, maintaining the windows. They're not improving education. And I think the most of the population, myself included, did not really understand how much education has changed in the last 50 years and how much our current buildings are constraining our teachers, right? Multi-tiered learning. You probably don't even know what that is. It's the ability to teach people at different levels. We don't have the space like these new school buildings do to help a kid that needs support, and also give the space for a kid that's excelling to be and have that ability. We literally don't have the space. And that's just one example that really stuck with me, but it really stuck out to me when I was able to see some of these school tours, how much the building really does impact the quality of the education. And those improvements are needed in all of our schools, and all of our neighboring communities are doing it. So we will be left behind if we don't make those improvements, as well as the maintenance. So if we could just have that teacher perspective in our future committee meetings, that would be great to really hear. And I would urge the committee to listen to them most on this.
Thank you, Ms. Benelli. Ms. Feeney.
Well, I just wanted to comment. I mean, I've asked a lot of questions from more of a community member standpoint, but I just wanted to mention from a parent standpoint, I just want to let everyone know that I've had two children that went to the Wildwood School. They went to the Woburn Street School, and they went to the North Intermediate. They had some amazing teachers. So if Christine Holleran, you're on, you were an amazing kindergarten teacher. So thank you for being part of the committee. I will say that I'm a proponent of these age-appropriate separate schools. I do think there's a different opinion of transitioning the kids from one school to the other. I know that I've asked my children and their friends very recently, how did you feel about that? They loved their experiences. They loved feeling, that safe and confidence that comes with being with children their own age when they were pre-K and K. And they got excited to move up to the new school when they got to go to the Woburn Street School. And similarly when they moved up to the north. So I do think that there is something to be said for that. It was one of the things that attracted us when we were looking at communities to move to. I think it's what makes Wilmington unique. Again, with whatever we do, it would be nice to preserve what we're doing on the west side of town, because I don't think it's fair to give different educational experiences across the town. But from a parent perspective, I can tell you, I very recently asked children, my children, their friends, they loved their experiences and they loved being at those separate schools. So I just wanted to offer that to kind of complement what Michael had said.
Ms. Feeney, Dee Connolly.
Hi. Awesome conversation. As a West Side parent, I am definitely concerned about the inequality between the two sides of town. I definitely believe the Wildwood obviously needs to be rebuilt. I'm concerned about building a K-5 school on the north side and still having the 3 schools on the west side. A lot of conversation has been around improving the educational capability of the north side, but where does that leave the west side? As well as if we take on this giant bill to rebuild the north side, in a couple of years, we know the west side is going to need a lot of work, as it already does. And is the town going to want to foot that bill when they're already footing the bill for the north side? I am extremely concerned that the west side will be completely voted down at that point, and I think that needs to be considered.
Thank you for that. And thank you for having the last comment. And so I want to take this opportunity, there are no other questions or comments from those in attendance, to thank. I think at our peak online here, we had 68 participants who were joining in, and this was also being live streamed on WCTV. So it's uncertain how many are on that format, but we're doing our best to try and convey or push out attention to this project, as we will continue to do, and my office will continue to do, in partnership with members of the building committee and the town. For our panelists who are here tonight, our project management team, as well as our design team, thank you for being here. Thank you to our town manager and assistant town manager. And most importantly, thank you for all of you for taking the time out of a summer evening to join in this important project and in the important conversation. Again, this recording will be made available. So for friends and neighbors who are unable to join live tonight, we will get it up on our website, I'm sure, by the end of the day tomorrow. And the presentation that was shared tonight will also be accompanied with it. So again, thank you for your interest in the project. Thank you for your time tonight, and have a good rest of the evening.